Hello. Alrighty guys, the next video we're gonna watch is Attachment Styles Deep Dive Valentine's Member Gift. Wow, a member video for free by none other than HealthyGamerGG. So let's check it out.
The internet. We're keeping everyone at arm's length, more and more situationships. So people who are anxiously attached tend to be very insecure.
On 1 to 5
Unless I do this perfectly, this person will leave me. I'm not worth dating. And then we get to the real crux of it, which is where is the problem? The problem is inside your head. If y'all want to unpack attachment, what you need to understand is... So today, we are going to be talking about attachment theory. But today, we're going to be going a little bit deeper. So if y'all remember, we had a deep dive into attachment theory, which was great because it was sort of like focused on an individual. So how can we understand the development of attachment? How can we understand how attachment may affect you? And today what we're going to be talking about is attachment specifically in relationships. So attachment theory is critical, and it's kind of all about relationships, which is kind of ironic because like the last time we talked about attachment, it turns out that attachment is so much more important for like other dimensions of your life than we originally realized. So it even determines the way that you relate to the world, how you find motivation, how you find direction, all these kinds of things. And so we were sort of like left with some info on relationships, but we just couldn't do it justice. And so what we've done is prepared a basically 2-hour lecture on attachment specifically with relationships.
We're gonna make this a two-parter.
This is the way that this lecture is going to be organized.
Part 1, Part 2.
So the first thing that we're going to do is explain in some very basic, high-level ways how the attachment system works.
Let me just see if the sound is good.
System of attachment, that shouldn't take long.
Okay.
We'll do maybe a very quick recap of the 3 major attachment styles: secure, avoidant, and anxious. And then we're going to get to the fun stuff. So we are going to characterize and give y'all examples of this is what anxious attachment looks like. This is what avoidant attachment looks like in the context of a relationship. This is what secure attachment looks like. And so when we talk about it in the context of a relationship, y'all may be asking, wait, are you talking about me or are you talking about my partner? And the answer is both. So we're going to say, okay, this is what anxiously attached people tend to do in relationships. This is what it looks like. And if you are this person, this is what you do. If you are dating this person, this is what you do. Okay? So it's kind of like understanding that in the context of relationship-specific examples and features. So after we look at avoidant attachment, anxious attachment, and secure attachment, then we're going to talk a little bit about the intersections between them. So we're going to say, like, if you're an anxiously attached person and you're dating an avoidant attachment person, this is what the relationship looks like. This is what the challenges are. Then what we're going to do is, or actually before that, we'll go through some like case examples of common relationship issues and how attachment styles affect those issues. So for example, things like situationships, okay? Things like, you know, should we move in together? When is too early to move in? Why does one person want to move in together? Why one person not move in together? We're going to get a far better understanding, a sophisticated understanding of this concept of commitment issues. What does that even mean? So we're going to understand it way better. So we're going to go through some common relationship issues. And then in the last section, what we're going to do is like tell y'all what to do about it. So if you're dating someone who has a non-secure attachment style, how do you approach that person? If you are someone who has an anxious attachment style, avoidant attachment style, what can you do for yourself? And we'll give y'all actually a couple of very key fundamentals that essentially will help you fix your attachment system or improve your attachment system, whether you're secure, anxious, or avoidant. Okay? Does that make sense? So let's dive in.
And it became a mess.
Let's start by looking at the basics of the attachment system.
Oh boy.
If we go back, this is going to be a super quick recap, okay? So if we go back and we remember, here's what we discover. So the first is that human beings have to form relationships in order to survive, okay? So like human beings are communal. So what happened is that as we started to evolve, we started to like develop systems in our brain.
He's talking basic instinct here.
And by the way,
basic human need
is very grounded in like neurobiology. So there's like good physiological
attachment theory is everything.
We developed a system.
It's like the first thing you should check out, guys.
Bonds.
The very first thing.
This is what the attachment system is: the ability to form bonds. So humans can form bonds in 4 different ways. Okay. So way number 1 is securely attached, and this is the healthiest form of attachment. Now this is where we also have to take a quick aside and say that, you know, there are cases like, so this like attachment theory is one of these things where they're not all equal.
I'm so
like,
far
securely
from
attached is just better than the other 2. And we're going to teach y'all how to get there. And this is sometimes what happens with human beings is that like, yeah, there's a lot of individual variability, but some things generally speaking correlate with health, happiness, success, and secure attachment is one of those things. Now, then what happens is sometimes if the bond doesn't form properly, there's another situation which arises where this person, let's say this is the child, and this is the parent or caregiver. So if the parent is available and supportive for the child, then that child becomes securely attached. The child feels safe. If the child has needs, the child's needs get met. Okay? So the child learns, okay, like other human beings are like decent. I can rely on them. I can form bonds with them. We can develop a relationship that has give and take, and everything is kind of hunky-dory and positive. Sometimes what happens is we have children who, when they have needs, they sometimes get met or they sometimes don't get met. So the child is kind of confused because sometimes when I'm hungry, I get food, and sometimes when I'm not hungry, I don't get food. So there is inconsistency. And when there's inconsistency, the child begins to fear. They're like, because I can't rely on it, right? It's random. It's not something that I can relax and be assured that it's done. So what ends up happening is this child actually starts amplifying signals of distress. So since my parents are kind of distracted, since they work a lot, unless I start crying or throwing temper tantrums, I'm not going to get my needs met. So inconsistency in getting your needs met results in an amplification of signals of distress and also results in a fear of abandonment, right? Because unless I cry loud enough, you are not going to be there to support me. So they become very, very scared, and they start to move towards their caregiver in a more like neurotic way. The other thing that can happen is a child can learn that if I am emotionally vulnerable and if I try to bond with other people, if I try to connect with other people, I will get punished. So when I cry, when I try to get my needs met, I tend to get ignored. And this results in avoidant attachment. So this is a situation where the child fundamentally fears connection. Why? So let's run through this very quickly, okay? So if I'm a kid and I invite my parents, I say, hey, I have a soccer or football tournament this weekend. Can y'all please come and cheer me along? Because I'm competing and it's the finals. And so supportive parents will show up. And then sometimes what will happen is unsupportive parents won't show up. And then what this person does is then they start to realize that, okay, being vulnerable and connecting with another human being is dangerous. Because when I'm vulnerable, when I connect, that makes me vulnerable. And when I'm vulnerable, I get hurt. So what we actually want to do is retreat away from the relationship. Okay? Then the last kind is disorganized attachment. Okay? Now, here's the key thing to remember. About 50% of people are securely attached. 25% of people are anxiously attached. 20% of people are avoidantly attached, and about 5% of people are disorganized, have a disorganized attachment. We see disorganized attachment in cases of severe neglect or trauma. So we're actually not going to talk too much about disorganized attachment because it also isn't very, I mean, in some ways it's consistent, but there's a lot of variability in disorganized attachment, and
disorganized is very heavy.
Circumstances. So this really gets to like quite an
like all the extremes
level
are in there.
It's very hard to talk about disorganized attachment in kind of a like generic way. So what we're going to focus on is
like
this
physical
95%
abuse, very
of people
big
today. Okay, so this is the basics of the attachment system. So now we're going to talk about the attachment systems. All right,
like
so here's what
abuse.
Happens. So remember that attachment is about the way we form bonds. Now, in the securely attached person, we're capable of forming bonds. We'll talk about what that looks like. The anxiously attached person is afraid that if I don't do the right thing, you will leave. And in order to get my needs met in a relationship, I have to amplify my signals. So I have to cry a lot. I have to do other things like play games, which we'll get to, in order to pull you in. So people who are anxiously attached primarily have gravitational strategies. I'm going to pull you towards me. So one example of this is like, if I feel jealous because you have a coworker who I am paranoid that you're going to hook up with. Instead of telling you, hey, I'm paranoid that you're going to hook up with this person, instead what I'll do is I'll say, okay, fine, just dump me now because you found someone better anyway. Just let's get it over with. So you'll be a little bit histrionic. You'll kind of amplify things. You'll start to feel kind of distressed. And if we look at what happens in the attachment system, basically it's the same for avoidant or anxious. Basically, there's a certain signal which your brain interprets as a danger sign. Okay? This person is pulling away. In the case of anxious attachment, I'm losing this person. Then what happens is the body and the brain and the mind go into panic mode. We're losing this person.
I have a bunch of
Therefore,
anxious
we
as
need
well.
to engage in certain behaviors to pull this person back in. I'm losing them. I need them back before it's too late. So I will do things like I will play games, I will cry, I will do all kinds of stuff. I'll have sex, right? Because sex is a way for us to bond and be closer. Because after we have sex, then we're cuddling and then we're held and then you're not going anywhere, at least for a couple of hours. But if you leave afterward, it's going to mess up people with anxious attachment. So this is important to understand. If y'all want to unpack attachment for yourself or your partner, what you need to understand is that there's certain signals that will trigger the attachment system. And then the attachment system will respond to fix that problem. Now, this is where things get a little bit tricky. Because the anxiously attached person, what triggers their system, what's the danger sign, what's the sirens going off, is someone pulling away. For the avoidant person, it is someone getting close. Okay? So for avoidantly attached people, as we start to become close and we start to become vulnerable, we're like, oh my God, this is the danger zone. This is how we get hurt. When we start to trust people, when we start to rely on people, when we start to love people, we get disappointed and it hurts us. So the avoidant person gets triggered by closeness and their attachment system protects them by pushing someone away. The anxiously attached person is the opposite. I get triggered by someone pulling away and I'm going to respond by pulling them back towards me. They're leaving, I'm going to pull them in, okay? So this is the basics of the attachment system. And if you guys are dating people who are like incredibly frustrating to date, and we'll talk about which way they're frustrating, because they're frustrating in different ways, we'll demonstrate how the attachment system perfectly explains their behaviors. Like, you'll be able to really understand this in an eye-opening way. So the other really interesting thing is that for those of y'all that are into Red Pill and MGTOW and all that kind of stuff, this is basically textbook avoidant attachment. And it's literally textbook. And we'll talk about that a little bit, okay? So a lot of these people have been traumatized, have been raised in a particular area where they fear intimacy. So they like try to really reduce the emotional connection. Emotional connection is danger for them, okay? We'll also go through some specific things like, different pairings of relationships and things like that. But does everyone understand that this is basically how attachment works? I'm a human. I get signals from the relationship. Just like hunger or thirst, I respond to those signals in particular ways. When I feel hungry, I'm going to eat something. So my brain will send me signals, this is dangerous because this person is pulling too far away, in the case of anxious attachment, or this person is getting too close, we have to push them away. Okay? So now let's go over details of what this looks like.
So once you learn this,
understand
it's very hard to kick,
of the relationship.
But you can learn to understand it and then maybe not act immediately on the first instinct.
People who are avoidant basically view relationships as
it's very hard.
Two separate people coexisting. We're basically almost like roommates. We don't have a shared life. I have my life, you have your life. Okay? So this manifests in all kinds of ways, like valuing independence. So people who are avoidantly attached will be like, I'm not going to compromise my career for the sake of my relationship. Like, I would never move to another city for someone, right? My career, like, I have my life, you have your life. If you have to move away, you have to move away, and that's okay. These are like two separate lives, all right? This also, like, this separation of people coexisting also involves other kinds of things. Like, we don't necessarily need to move in together. I have my space. You have your space, and that's totally fine. We can have separate bank accounts. Another good example, right? And then also, like, we don't have to define the relationship. It is what it is. It's kind of like a situationship. It's like, I'm chilling, you're chilling. There's no, like, integration of two people's lives into one thing, okay? Now, this can also manifest in other, like, subtler ways. Like, people can be very work-focused, right? So you'll have, like, someone, let's say, a man or woman or non-binary person who's in their mid-20s, and they're like, oh, like, I'm just focused on work right now. Relationships are not a top priority. Now, that's a very reasonable thing for someone in their mid-20s to say, and this is what's so tricky about attachment, is many of the attachment behaviors sound very logical or reasonable, but underneath it's the attachment system at play. So the main thing that I want y'all to really think about is for each of these examples, what does this do for this person's relationship? So when someone is in their mid-20s and says, I'm focused on my career, on the surface, there's nothing wrong with that, right? Like, obviously, like, okay, you're mid-20s, focus on your career. But 20% of people out there will use that statement to avoid bonding with other people. Now, this is important to understand. So we're not saying that people can't be career focused. What I'm saying is that they will use a very legitimate excuse to subconsciously prevent bonding with someone else. Now, if you're career focused, that doesn't mean that you're avoidantly attached. This is the problem with, like, TikTok mental health advice, right? They're like, it is all one way. This is a nuance to understand. When we look at the constellation of avoidant attachment, this can be one of the features. And even this is subconscious. So when I work with avoidantly attached people, it takes me a while to like break through to them that, hey, are you using your emphasis on career to avoid committing to relationships? Oh, I'm so career focused and like I have this opportunity to move halfway across the world because of my career. And then when we tunnel down into it, I'm like, where did this opportunity come from? Oh, I applied very aggressively. Hold on a second. So when you applied very aggressively, what did you think was going to happen if you got the job that's halfway across the world? What did you think was going to happen to your relationship? And they're like, I don't know. I'm career focused. Right? So they're not, so career focused is fair enough, but then they're not relationship focused. And why? Because they're afraid of getting hurt. They value their independence. Does that make sense to people? So avoidantly attached people are going to really view their lives as separate. It's not like a life that we share together. It's like your life is over there, my life is over here. Okay? They can be very work focused, etc. Now, let's talk about how they view, this is kind of how they view relationships, but there are a couple of other features. So things that they do, like, so here's some challenges that come with avoidantly attached people. So the first is that they send mixed signals. They're not the only ones, but they send a certain kind of mixed signal. So dating someone who's avoidantly attached can involve a lot of like experience of kind of mixed signals. So the reason for this is that people who are avoidantly attached are conflicted because all human beings require emotional intimacy. They require bonds with other human beings. But people who are avoidantly attached get burned by bonds with other human beings, right? So I want y'all to think about this like someone who is starving, but gets nauseous every time they eat. What is going to be their relationship with food? I'm hungry, I need to eat. But the second I start eating, I start to feel nauseous. I don't want to eat anymore. This is what avoidantly attached people are like. They crave relationships subconsciously. So they seek out relationships, but once they engage in relationships, they get scared. If y'all want to dive deep into the most important topics for our community, check out HG memberships. So the first thing to understand is that there needs to be no outcome from small talk. This is a Vasana too. Your mind is Vasanas all the way down.
That is so crazy. Like once I understand
it's not that you don't have wants, it is that your wants
made a attachment video like a year ago, right?
To monthly streams, as well as a back catalog of a year's worth of content, in addition to
that
quests and so much more. If you're interested, you can sign up for $10 a month at
do an attachment
memberships, or click the link in the description below.
Yourself and just
so it's like something really weird can happen with an avoidantly attached person. They can pursue you very, very, very passionately at the beginning. And when they pursue you, you're like, oh, wow, this person is like super into me. But then something happens, like a month goes by, 2 months go by, and then like suddenly they're like not responding to your texts, and you're like, what happened? Like we started sleeping together, and then what happens is on social media, we get all these like propagations of if you're a woman, you shouldn't sleep with a guy on a first date because then they'll ghost you. That's not what's going on. You can, whether you sleep with someone on a first date, what happens after that is not uniform in the human race. I've worked with patients who have slept together on a first date, gotten married, had kids, happily ever after, at least for 25 years. And I've worked with people who slept together on a first date and then they get ghosted. Both are possible. It depends on the individual. And this is the biggest problem with a lot of this dating advice and red pill stuff. They don't account for individuality, right? They assume that all human beings are the same. So avoidantly attached people send mixed signals and it can feel very hot and cold. So they have that fundamental need for human closeness, but they also get really, really scared by being close. So this is fucking confusing if you're dating an avoidantly attached person. Because even if they don't text you for a while, you get frustrated. So you're like, okay, fine, whatever. And then you stop texting them. And then they'll do something weird. They'll start texting you again. And this is where all these notions of playing hard to get and all this kind of crap come from. Because you can actually trigger the avoidant attachment system by even pulling away yourself. Remember, they want to keep you at arm's length. They don't want you to be at room's length.
Yeah,
they don't want you to be at hand's length. They want you to be right in this middle zone where you're not too close and
much less avoidant now and much more anxious.
They'll try to pull you in a little bit, but generally speaking, what freaks them out, because the tendency in relationships is to get closer over time, is we get closer, they start to push you away. Okay, so this is also where like a lot of people with avoidant attachment have commitment issues, and this is a good example of what I would same thing as mixed signals. So it's like, yeah, I don't want you to date anyone else. I'm not really interested in dating anyone else, but I'm not ready to get married yet. I'm not ready. I'm not ready. I'm not ready. I'm not ready. What does that mean? I'm not ready. How do you get ready? There is, once again, a very legitimate process of getting ready to, let's say, get married or have a committed relationship.
I also couldn't marry yet.
If you have avoidant attachment, you will use this very legitimate rationale. Your attachment system will hijack this and tell you, hey, we're not ready because we don't want people to be closer. Okay, we're going to leave them right here. So people with avoidant attachment love these things like situationships. Okay, so then there are a couple of other behaviors that they do. Too expensive. So one is that they can have very uncompromising views of relationships. Okay, so this is where, like, remember, you're entitled to your opinion. I'm entitled to my opinion. My opinion is over here. Your opinion is over here. There doesn't need to be any overlap. We don't need to find some middle ground that both of us share. We don't need to do that. This isn't necessary. So a lot of times people with avoidant attachment will have very uncompromising views. This is the way things are. It's a man's job to do this. It's a woman's job to do this. We don't need to do things together. And this also can get very confusing because this looks like misogyny or misandry or whatever. But remember, the goal is like there should be no blending. We need to keep things separate. Okay, I'm not saying that misogyny and stuff can't exist as well. Once again, in the avoidant attachment system, it'll hijack all of these things to keep people at arm's length. Okay, so uncompromising views, and this can include things like worldviews, views on relationships, moving in, right? Which MOBA should you play? Which RPG should you play? You know, like, should video games be woke or not woke? They just have very, very uncompromising views because I am an independent unit. I'm an island to myself, and you can have your island over there, and it's like not a big deal. We can agree to disagree, okay? So this becomes really challenging in relationships because, as we'll talk about towards the end, relationships are about reconciling views. That's how you get to a successful relationship. It's not about who's right or wrong. And this is how they view things in relationships. If you're dating someone who's avoidant or you are avoidant, oftentimes there's no like subjectivity. There's no like opinion. There's a right way or a wrong way, and usually my way is right and your way is wrong. They very focused on objectivity because objectivity means that there's no blending. There's a clear line of what is okay or not okay. A couple of other things. Now we get to the interesting stuff. So, really fascinating. So people with avoidant attachment have a big problem with idealization and fantasy. So usually what they end up doing, they have this idea of a perfect partner. They think to themselves, and now we got to kind of go off script a little bit. So people with avoidant attachment sometimes can appear to be like romantic. And they're like, I'm looking for the one. I'm looking for the perfect partner. I'm looking for like, there's someone out there who has everything that I'm looking for, and I'm going to keep looking for that person until I find them. Current online dating has made this problem worse because it gives you this idea that that person is out there. You just need to find them. But let's unpack why there is no such thing as the perfect partner and why people look for the perfect partner in the first place. So people who are avoidantly attached, remember that they tend to be disappointed by their close human relationships. So when I'm disappointed by my close human relationships, when I get hurt, when I connect to someone, what is the way that I protect myself from that hurt? It is through things like numbness, distraction. I'm going to avoid my feelings because they hurt. And the safest way to avoid my feelings is to never get close to anyone. Because if I'm never close to anyone, I'll never feel hurt and disappointed. So avoidance of feelings at all costs. Okay? So then what happens is they start dating a real human being. And when they date a real human being, that comes with positive and negative experiences of a relationship. And they don't like that. So what they say is, okay, I'm dating this person is flawed. I don't like the way that I feel because they think that the perfect relationship will make me feel emotionally perfect. But they don't feel emotionally perfect in a relationship. That's why they keep on looking for this very special person who will make me feel perfect on the inside, who will make me feel safe, who will make me feel, will never disappoint my vulnerability, will never take advantage of me, will always be there for me, right? This idealized version of what they wanted when they were kids. So they're looking for this perfect partner. And the reason that you're not perfect is because there is some negativity that they experience. They don't know how to, we'll get to this in a second. They don't know how to even understand what they feel. They're oftentimes very alexithymic. They're very emotionally numb. They just know it's not perfect. Because if it was perfect, then I'd feel perfect. But I don't feel perfect. I don't know why I don't feel perfect, but the problem must be you because they don't explore their internal environment. This is why they tend to be very work-focused, right? I'm going to focus on my job. I'm going to do this. I'm going to do this. I'm going to live in the external world. I'm going to achieve a lot in the external world. I'm going to step away from these stupid things called emotions. So what they end up doing is actually looking for the perfect partner. And the perfect partner is someone who makes them feel safe, gives them exactly what they want, which is impossible, which is that 100% safety with 100% vulnerability and no chances to be taken, no disappointment, no hurt. I want to be vulnerable, but guarantee that you're not going to hurt me. So they idealize things. And this can be very hard for the partner of an avoidantly attached person because they're always talking about this perfect version of you if you did this better. So this is also where they tend to be very critical. Now we get to the next thing. So this is going to all kind of come together, okay? So they're looking for the perfect partner. In turn, they tend to be critical because there's a gap between you and the other person, this idealized partner. The other thing that's really cool about being critical of your partner is when you're critical of your partner and you devalue them, what happens to the strength of your emotional connection? You push them away, right? It's really hard to let go of someone who's perfect. It's very easy to let go of someone who's flawed. Right, I can move on from you if you're flawed, and the more flawed you are, the easier it is for me. It's so crazy how perfect he describes. You're not that great, so I don't need to be vulnerable with you. I can find something better out there. So this is really scary, but they will oftentimes do a lot of devaluing stuff. In the worst case scenarios, this is stuff like negging in Red Pill, right? So when we put someone else down, it allows us to like protect ourselves from forming bonds with them. But this can also be like very, very subtle things. So like they can like make comparisons. with
Just
other
be
people,
toxic.
they can be like, oh, this person does this and this person does this, and why can't you do this like this person? Or they may not even like blame you for it. They'll just make these like subtle comparisons. They'll hyper focus on small mistakes. Okay. So this is a great quote from that Amir Levine's book. I remember reading this and just thinking this was brilliant. So when they look at an apple, they focus on the worm instead of the apple.
Yeah, actually
Like they'll
came
ignore
quite
90%
far
of the good stuff and just zero in on the bad
away
stuff.
from being
And if you're
avoidant.
someone who's avoidantly attached and you look at the history of your relationships, what you'll find, like Jerry Seinfeld, I think is a really great example of this.
This
Y'all have seen
giga
Seinfeld
over the
comedy
top
show,
cliche,
right? Where he'll like
no more for
he'll
sure.
he'll break up with women for all
But I
kinds of
was
tiny
that
stuff.
so much.
Like he breaks up with a woman because she eats her peas 1 pea at a time, and he's like, "Who does that? I can't date someone who eats their peas 1 pea at a time." Like he can't handle that, right? So they'll come up with all these like they'll make mountains out of molehills with like focusing on small little mistakes or little imperfections, and that'll become a reason to break up with someone. Once again, what's the goal? It's to push people away. And remember that with this, the triggering of the attachment system, we will see a lot more of this kind of stuff when you get close. So when you're dating someone who's avoidantly attached or you are avoidantly attached, if you pay attention, this is what things look like. So here's
I guess
closeness,
I'm more anxious
and
now.
here's
I'm not
happiness.
sure.
And
I
what
want
you'll
to say
find
I'm
is that
secure,
the
but
curve looks like this.
I'm jealous
So if
and
we're
stuff.
too close, I'm unhappy. Or if there's very little closeness, I'm unhappy. I want you here. I want this middle level of closeness. And then if the closeness increases to a 10,
don't
then
trust.
I become unhappy. And once the closeness gets over here, my attachment system triggers, and then I start to neg. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to push us back to this safe zone because this is where I feel safe. So I will devalue you. I will criticize you. I will even move to a different city to get physical distance from you. I won't want to move in. And they're resistant to move along this axis as well. Moving in together, getting married, meeting the parents, all this kind of stuff that advances the closeness of the relationship, avoidant people don't like. I'm happy to just be in this nebulous 8-year, we've been dating for 8 years and our relationship is limbo. I'm actually totally fine with that. They may still be unhappy, but they get scared anytime things advance. Let's talk about Let's talk about conflict. So for avoidantly attached people, their conflict can look like a couple of different things. It can look like explosions or withdrawal. Sometimes they get very angry, and it can be very frustrating to like argue with people who are avoidantly attached because they'll come up with some reason, but that's not the real reason. And so trying to talk to them about this is like very, very confusing. So, let's take this example of like moving to a different city. And it's like, I don't understand, like, why couldn't you apply for things that were like at least in the ballpark? Like there are plenty of jobs in New York or San Francisco. Why did you have to apply to Hong Kong? Like, I don't understand this. And they're like, and then they come back at you and they're like, well, it's because you're not supporting my career. And like, this is an important time in my life and it's a great opportunity. And I wish you were more supportive. And then you've like been supportive, but you're kind of confused. They're like, there's lots of opportunities here. I don't understand why you don't just apply for those. So oftentimes like the conflict with them is very confusing. And it can be quite explosive because they're not good at handling their emotions. Or what they'll do is they'll just withdraw. They'll give you the cold shoulder. Things are getting too close. Because remember, conflict is a sign of closeness in a relationship sometimes. And so what they'll do is just ghost, right? They'll withdraw, they'll numb, they'll retreat into themselves. They'll also create physical space. They'll go back to their place. They'll move out. They'll go stay with a friend. They'll do whatever. So it can be both of these things. And the really challenging thing about conflict with these people, first of all, they don't really have a problem with conflict usually. And maybe they'll just avoid it, but that's still like not a problem with conflict. They have to deal with conflict, which is I'm going to avoid. The other problem is that they're very poor at articulating their emotions or experiences, right? So like I'm applying for a job in Hong Kong, and the real reason for that is because I'm afraid of intimacy. They're not aware of that. And so they can't even say, like, the healthy thing to do in that situation is this relationship is getting closer. I feel afraid that I'm going to get hurt. I feel afraid that if I choose a job or a career path based on you and our relationship falls apart, I will have lost 2 opportunities. Not only did I lose this relationship, but I lost this career opportunity as well. I'm afraid that you won't be there for me when I need it, and making the sacrifice is not worth it. This is what they feel, but they don't know it and they can't articulate it. So you, as in a relationship, can't solve this problem because like they're not even aware of what it is. So they're very poor at articulating their emotions and experiences. They're not very good communicators. Remember, going back to this,
you have 2 of these kinds,
right? There's
you're not going
there's
anywhere.
a right and a wrong way. There isn't like
Children.
feelings or any that doesn't enter the. There's a right or a wrong thing to do. That's the beginning and end of it. There's no feelings to discuss. Like who cares? Opportunity is opportunity. Now, once again, the reason for that is because if we go back to our basic attachment theory, remember that we learn our emotional experience through mirroring, right? So remember that we learn what we're feeling when our parents are emotionally available to us. So What does that mean? So remember, now we'll understand why happens in avoidant attachment. Because when I'm feeling sad and I'm a kid, I don't know what sad is, right? So when I'm feeling sad and I'm like upset about something, my parents will come to me and be like, oh, you must be feeling sad. And then they mirror you. They're like, oh my God, is Widow Baby sad? Oh, poor Widow Baby. Oh my goodness, Widow Baby, let me hold you. So you mirror their emotion, and then the kid is like, oh, this is sadness. And this is the face you should make when people are sad. Where? Dr. K's crying. We even change the way that we pronounce words. R's become W's, and we go, wah. And then when we get emotionally mirrored, okay, I'm not alone. The world understands me. I'm sad, mom or dad is sad, and they do the right thing. They hold me. Oh, it's okay, Widow Baby's crying. Oh, I'm so sorry, Widow Baby. Avoidantly attached people don't get that. So since they don't get that, I'm crying, and then my parent. So I had a friend who used to have nightmares. So their parents were trying to teach them how to sleep on their own. And so the kid would be having nightmares and crying in the bed, and one of their parents would be sitting in a chair just watching them. So they're like, I'm here. There's no reason to be scared. They didn't touch. They didn't emotionally mirror. They were emotionally neutral. They're like, look, I'm here. There's nothing in the room. And they would just watch their child cry. Traumatize the kid. Kid is like high functioning, is in a relationship now and has kids and stuff, but man, they were quite articulate with how it messed them up. They're like, yeah, my parents would just watch me cry and suffer and like didn't do anything. But they were like, that's what they did. So that's how you become avoidantly attached. Okay? So once you don't know what you're feeling, then it's very hard to articulate what's going on. And if you're in a relationship with an avoidant attached person, the way it feels is that there's something always in the way of the relationship. There's some reason why we can't advance. There's some reason why we can't move in together. And even if we move in together, your partner is pulling apart, pulling away in some way. So they're very scared. So things like situationships, things like these like long-term, like we've been dating for 14 years and it's going nowhere. We're like coexisting as roommates who sometimes have sex. This is avoidant attachment. Now, let's talk about sex for a moment. So people who are avoidantly attached, so now we're going to take a quick aside, okay? So in the 70s, there was some really cool research about types of love. And what people basically discovered is that there are 6 different scientific categories of love. There are 6 different ways that human beings look at love. There's eros love. So this is love that is like passionate. It's like, oh my God, I love you so much. Love me. We were made for each other. Kiss me. I need you. Do you need me? That's eros love. This is what we tend to see in most of our movies. There's another kind of love. I think it's called agape love. I don't know how to pronounce it. Maybe I got a letter wrong. So agape love is sacrificial love. This is where I love you, and the way that I demonstrate my love is not, oh, kiss me. It's like, I'll give you a kidney, right? That's very different. Like, no one is like, in our rom-coms, no one is like giving people kidneys or like working extra shifts at the bank to pay for your medical treatment, right? Like that doesn't, I mean, sometimes it happens in movies and stuff, but that's not what we really romanticize as love. Sometimes we'll have agape love, so we show sacrificial love. All right, so securely attached people love in these 2 ways. So if you're in a relationship with a securely attached person, their love towards you is going to be passionate and sacrificial. This is probably the healthiest. There's another kind of love. So avoidantly attached people have a kind of love called ludus. And ludus is a playful love. It is an uncommitted love. It is a free love. It is let's play around and let's have a good time. Let's live in the moment and let's not make sacrifices. It's fun. It's playful. It's actually viewed as a game. Okay, so if you look at the Greek ludus, this is like playful and game-like love. Love is a game to be won and lost, to be titillated and enjoyed. But there's no commitment, there's no sacrifice. And it's hilarious, right? Because like literally if you look at avoidant attachment people in the red pill community, and I'm not trying to criticize them, I think they figured this stuff out, right? They looked at themselves as a community and they stumbled upon these truths in their own way, which is a little bit less scientific. But they call it the game. They call relationships literally a game. And that's what ludus refers to. So the Greeks figured this crap out thousands of years ago. There were scientific studies about it in the 70s where we said, okay, there's a certain type of people who has ludus love. Ludus love is playful, uncommitted. It's all about having a good time. If we're not having a good time, why bother? Why sacrifice? Why, I'm going to move halfway across the country and I'll fuck people over there. Uncommitted, free, playful. This is ludus love. This is what avoidantly attached people have. And there are scientific studies that correlate these 2 things. And then we get to anxiously attached people who have manic love. Now, manic love is a whole different thing. Manic love is obsessive. It is possessive. It is, no, I love you with all my heart and my passion, and don't ever leave me. Don't ever leave me. Let's move to a desert island together. Let's move in together. Let's have babies together. Let's mix our DNA. Let's do everything. I own you, and you own me. It's not just passionate. It goes beyond that to manic, obsessive, possessive. Okay, and there are a couple of other loves, which we won't go into, but it's really fascinating because we can see this history of attachment being manifested even in the Greek views of love. even in these research studies, when attachment theory was still, I mean, it was there, and then as attachment theory has grown, we've correlated this. So they'll even, like, if you talk to someone who's avoidantly attached, they will view love. It's not that they're incapable of love, right? So, but they just view love as like, this is why situationship is perfect. It's joyful. We're doing this because it's fun. And if it stops being fun, we stop doing it. No strings attached, right? And the red pillars call it, literally, they call it the game, which is what Ludus refers to, okay? So this is avoidant attachment. Can you have both attachment? Yeah, so we'll talk about that. They're blends. So I guess we can talk about that now. So we're talking about these patterns in avoidant attachment. And remember that like a securely attached person or an anxiously attached person can have a couple of these things, right? So it's not that like all avoidant people have all of them and none of these traits are shared by any of the others. We as human beings are a blend of everything. It's just which one is predominant. So even a securely attached person will have some features of this, okay? So let's talk a little bit about anxious attachment, okay? So first thing that we talk about is how do they view the relationship?